us today, and I'm gonna tell you a bit more about the trip that we've been doing for 4 years now, on the wake of this very elegant gentleman right here, Charles Darwin, of course. So, a few words on myself, just so you understand who's talking to you now. So I'm a documentary filmmaker, as you can probably tell from this picture. So I've been traveling the world to testify, I'd say, of the state of ecosystems and biodiversity. I've been doing that job for 12 years now, and it's my passion. You know, my passion is to go out there and meet wildlife, you know, animals and vegetations alike. This is me on the Captain Darwin trip in the Falkland Islands. So we'll get there, guys, in a few dozens of minutes. So what I want to do through those movies that I'm making is basically to give food for thoughts. I really like this expression in English. I'm a Frenchman, as you can probably tell by now. Food for thoughts to citizens of the world, you know, to think about the nature that's around us, biodiversity, and the many connections that we have with it, of course. I met a guy a few years ago. I didn't expect to meet him, actually. I met him through a book that's here. That's my Bible. I don't know if Charles Darwin would like the use of that word for his book, but so of course you recognize, or maybe you don't, I don't know, you know, it's Charles Darwin, but it's a young Charles Darwin, which is interesting because when we think of Charles Darwin, we tend to think of an old man, you know, like biodiversity Santa Claus or something like that, you know, with a long white beard. But before being old, as everyone in this planet, he was a young guy, and here he is. Charles Darwin, before setting sail on a huge journey aboard the Beagle. That's a journey that's going to last 5 years, and from this journey he's going to collect many countless observations that will lead him to form the theory of evolution. So that's the boat that he used to do this trip. So that's the HMS Beagle. Beautiful boat, 30 meter long, wooden boat, of course, with 70 people on board. Can you imagine 30 meters for 70 people? That's a crowded boat, I can tell you that. And this boat was captained. Oops, I think I lost my microphone here. I'm back. I think I'm back, yeah. So this beautiful gentleman, maybe some of them know him by name, yeah?
Robert.
Almost, you had like half of it. The other half is over there. Yeah, Fitzroy, exactly. Robert Fitzroy. Yeah, so he's the captain of the HMS Beagle. He was 26 at the time when he and Charles Darwin and the rest of the crew left from Plymouth in 1831. A young captain, but an even younger naturalist because Charles Darwin was 22 at the time. And off they went, those 70 crew members, on a big trip that started the 27th of December 1831 in Plymouth, England, of course. And during 5 years, they will sail across the planet, spending much time in South America, which was the primary aim, the primary mission of the boat, was to chart, to do maps of Patagonia and South America. It was in fact a military operation, so to speak, because making maps, of course, was a strategic mission to be able to control the world. So it was a military operation, and Charles Darwin was on board to collect samples, to study nature, and from this trip, from which he's going to come back in 1836, he's going to write the Origin of Species, in which he explained the theory of evolution. So that's going to happen like 20 years after he comes back, so he needed some time to think and to make sense of the many discoveries that he will do during this trip. So That happened 200 years ago. Why should we care? I mean, of course, we got the theory of evolution out of it, so that's something. But what's my personal journey with this trip is that I read this book when I was in Polynesia. It was 5 or 6 years ago now. And in this book, The Voyage of the Beagle, Charles Darwin will write about everything that he sees during his 5-year-long trip. So this book is a kind of photography of nature, of the world, really, at the start of the 19th century. And as I was reading this book in Polynesia, I figured that it would be an interesting idea to buy another boat, but to do the exact same trip and to compare landscapes and biodiversity 200 years apart. The idea of this trip is to understand, to take the time sailing across the planet to understand biodiversity now, where we stand, and what we can hope for the future in a troubled time. I think the idea was quite good, of course, but I had a few problems. First, I had no boat. Second, I didn't know how to sail, you know. So what did I do first, guys? As a very smart French guy, I first bought the boat. So I found this one, which is of course the most beautiful boat on planet Earth. I'm not afraid to say it. I think you will agree with me. Yeah, a mild reaction from the crowd. This is a very sturdy boat, and this is a metal steel boat that can go anywhere for a long period of time, and that's a very secure boat. It's not a good boat to win the Sydney-Hobart race, mind you, but it's a good boat to get to Hobart eventually. So I bought this ship in 2020. The name's Captain Darwin, of course. And as I bought my ship, I quickly understood that sailing was not only about pulling ropes, it was about many other things. And so this is my first encounter with an engine, you know, so I quickly understood that I needed to learn how to repair engines, do plumbery, this kind of stuff. And so, as you can see, my first reaction is, surprise, to say the least. So I learned how to take care of my ship, and I wanted, before we set sail, guys, to do this round the world trip, I wanted to do a quick visit of the inside. So that's the front cabin. So for 2 people, as you can see, it's a 40-footer. So 40 foot is not much, but it's enough to have 4 people on board. As I back up a little bit here, we are in the saloon, the main room, where we eat, where we work, where we spend time with the crew. This on the left is the galley, so that's the kitchen basically, where you have like everything that you need to properly cook, an oven, gas-powered stove. This is heater. This is another cabin in the back for 1.5 person, you know, or maybe 2 person that really like each other. And coming back to the main room, we enter the saloon again, and I think next is the head. So the head is the, no, that's the kitchen again. Yeah, okay, let's go to the heads now. So that's the bathroom. Of course, you have like one specific name for everything in a boat. And here you have a shower, you have like a toilet, of course, hot water. So it's a very comfy, very nice, compact boat. And this is the dog house. So I don't have a dog, so the dog would be me in this instance. And from here, you can have a 360 degrees look around through the hatches. And here is a steering wheel, some communication equipment, of course. And as you can see, I miss my mast over here. That's because the boat now, as I shot this video, was in fact near Paris, in Triel-sur-Seine, in a construction site, as you can see. So yeah, that was like I think that was the first day I met my boat, and I was still not sure to buy it at that point, but eventually I did, and it was the biggest and most beautiful mistake of my life. Yeah, so that's the boat. Bought it, learned how to sail it, more or less, as you will see a bit later in this presentation, and off I went to explore the world 200 years after Charles Darwin. So that's Antoinette. She's like doing a hike now in Tasmania somewhere, and she would have been delighted to be here, but she needed some time off. So let's do some stops. You know, let's stop in some countries. We will not stop everywhere because we don't have 3 hours. I do, but maybe you don't. So I'm going to try to fit in the 45 tiny minutes that I have from the museum. Of course, Emily. So this is Brazil. That's the first stop that we're going to take 200 years after Charles Darwin. So the task, when you think about it, is pretty immense because we have to compare a whole ecosystem 200 years apart. So how will we do that? Well, the thing that I decided to use is parts of the book, you know, of Charles Darwin. So I'm going to use tiny passage of the book to try to figure out what Charles Darwin would have seen when he stopped in Brazil in 1832. Let's do that together, guys. And I will read this passage, which I think is very beautiful. This was written the first day of his exploration of the tropical forest. The day has passed delightfully. Delight itself, however, is a weak term to express the feelings of a naturalist who, for the first time, has been wandering by himself in a Brazilian forest. Among the multitude of striking objects, the general luxuriance of the vegetation bears away the victory. Charles Darwin was a naturalist, but I think he was a poet as well. And it's been very pleasurable for me to read his book because it's a mix between information, of course, very concrete information, and poetry as well. And what's nice, and maybe we can start by this first conclusion of the comparison, is that my first time in the forest, I felt exactly the same. So the feeling of amazement, the feeling of awe in front of a new landscape, in front of nature, in front of wildlife, stay the same over the centuries, which I think is pretty nice. Let's understand a bit more about this forest he explored. So that wasn't the Amazon rainforest, which is in the top left corner. That was the Mata Atlantica, the tropical rainforest, the Atlantic tropical rainforest. And in 1832, the forest was 1,290,000 square kilometers. Of course, a lot has changed in 200 years. In 1832, Brazil counted 5 million inhabitants, and in 2025, 218 million inhabitants. Worldwide, at the time of Darwin, 1 billion inhabitants, and now 8 billion inhabitants. So only with these numbers can we understand that at some point, those people, we had to put them somewhere, you know. And in Brazil, in the tropical rainforest, it's supposed to cut down trees to make room for these new people. Let's have a look at this map, which I think is quite interesting. So I showed you on the previous map the extent of the rainforest. So that's an updated map. So the remnants of the forest are here in dark green. And as you can see, not much of it still stands today. In fact, only 10% of the forest that Charles Darwin explored in the early 19th century still stands in the 21st century. So of course the story of the comparison is a story of destruction, of change on a huge scale, because the population of the world grew very fast in those 2 centuries. Building of roads, for instance, that cut the forest. This is a picture that I've done with a drone of a construction site as well to build new homes on the old growth forest that you can see in the foreground, and in the background is already a second growth forest, sadly. So of course all of this is very harmful to the biodiversity, vegetation of course, because only 10% of the forest remains, but also animal biodiversity, like our friend the sloth here that I photographed on top of a tree. I wanted also to show that it's not a fatality. These changes on a big scale awakened networks of people trying to act in a positive manner to protect biodiversity. And in Brazil, the first stop that we are making, but in every other stops that we will make in the future for this trip, I met with women and men actively conserving nature, like here, for instance, planting trees. Let's leave the forest of Brazil to go in the colder regions. So we are going to sail south from Bahia here on the east coast of South America down to Patagonia. So Patagonia is a place that I wanted to visit for a long time, and going there with my boat was a dream come true. This dream had a price though, because it was quite hectic to sail over there. Maybe if there are some sailors over here, you know that in the tropical regions it's mild winds, except maybe in the doldrums, but if you sail south, you have like stiffer depressions, lows and highs, and of course storms like this. You have to imagine that at that moment I started it would have been like maybe a year and a half of sailing, so that was like one of the first storms that I encountered, and I can tell you that I wasn't feeling very well at that moment. And after a few storms, I finally met with Patagonia and the giant glaciers that you can find over there. It was a very moving first encounter, and I was also moved to be able to read Charles Darwin's view of the glaciers at that moment. Let's try to continue our comparison. So we did a comparison in the forest. Let's now do a comparison of the glaciers. This time we will not be using Charles Darwin's work, but the work of a friend of his. This friend is called Conrad Martens. Do you know about Conrad Martens? He's an artist, and he would be known by you guys in Australia because after spending time on the Beagle, he settled in Sydney, where I lived, starting from 1835, if I'm not mistaken. So this painting was done on the 9th of June 1833. You have to imagine that the Beagle comes in this bay, Wharf Bay. It's dark when they arrive, it's cloudy, overcast, and the night passes. And in the morning, Charles Darwin comes on deck after a good night of sleep in a hammock, and he sees this magnificent view. He calls for his friend Conrad and says, Conrad, you should paint this scene because it's so beautiful. And then Conrad starts to paint. And if we analyze this painting, we understand that we are in Monte Sarmiento, so that's like a big mountain, one of the tallest mountains of Patagonia. There's a glacier in the center, the Conway Glacier, And you can see here the HMS Beagle, the boat of Charles Darwin. So what we did with my crew is that we tried to find like the exact spot where Konrad Martens was and took a photograph to replicate this composition. That's what we did. So the time of Darwin, and as you can see here, 200 years after, Monte Sarmiento still stands. We replaced the Beagle by our boat. But if we look at the center of the image, we see at the time of Charles Darwin the glacier that comes almost to sea level, and now the glacier is 500 meters on top of its position 200 years ago. So this is, of course, an effect of climate change, of the rising temperatures of our planet, and that is definitely a problem that did not exist at Charles Darwin's time. You have to imagine that at Charles Darwin's time, early 19th century, it was the start of the Industrial Revolution, and the effect of this Industrial Revolution started to be felt late 19th century and grew bigger and bigger over the 20th century. So this is another view that I think is quite interesting. So of course, in 1834, this line wasn't drawn by Charles Darwin himself. He didn't fly a helicopter, but the geologist can actually see from the geological lines, where the glaciers were in the past. So this was the line of the Conway Glacier in 1834, and this is the glacier now in 2025. Here's another interesting comparison. So this time we leave Charles Darwin and Konrad Martens a bit. That's a photograph that was taken in 1913 by an Italian explorer, still in Patagonia. So this is the Marinelli Glacier. And I did the same work, but this time comparing a photo to a photo, which was a bit easier. And lining up the crest of the mountains here, I could get the same shot. So this is the glacier in 1913, of course, and 100 years after, a receding of 16 kilometers in the fjord, which is, of course, quite big. And all of these explorations were done on a sailing vessel. So as you can imagine, it comes with highs and some of the times lows. So this is a high, definitely sailing past a glacier with a sea leopard sleeping and napping iceberg. And of course, some of the times, some lows. So this is arguably the worst day of my life, guys. I'm very happy to share it with you today. So, on this photograph, as you can see, I'm not breathing like happiness, of course. So this is the boat that we visited just a bit earlier. So I reassure you, this boat is still standing. It's not sunk. It's at the Royal Yacht Club of Tasmania at the moment. So yeah, this was a very weird day, I have to say. I wanted to sail close to this glacier, to go at the back of the fjord, really. And to do that, I had to sail through a very narrow passage that I was supposed to go in at slack tide. So slack tide, guys, I don't know if you know about it. It's like when there's no current, of course. So I checked online when there's no current in this point. Internet, of course, told me something that was completely off by hours. But I was like, oh, if internet tells me to do it, so I go. You have to remember that I'm a new sailor, so I had to learn things in the hard way. And so this is the passage, very close to a small island here. The Marinelli Glacier would be at the back of the fjord here. And so this is where I stranded the boat. So I hit rocks 4 times, very big shocks, before being completely stopped. And it was the ebb, so receding tide. So I was blocked, and then the water started to go low. So I was losing floatability. And what happens if you lose floatability with a boat, of course, is that the boat tips more and more and more and more. And at some point I realized that if I was doing nothing, the boat will completely fall over, fills with water, and would sink completely. So the first call I made was to the military operation in Punta Arenas. So that's the closest city from this point, 200 kilometers away. The second call I wanted to do was for my insurance company. I just waited a bit for this one. Maybe I could get away with this situation and not having to do that call, so I didn't do it. And what happened really, to tell you how we got away with it, is that we tied the mast, as you can see here, with a long line to a rock on the island where the photograph is standing now. So that's the rock. And using this rock, I avoided the boat to completely fall over and fill with water. And in that way, I just needed to wait so the water would go down and up again. And when it was up again, I could exit this difficult position. So time is a very flexible idea, of course. These few hours felt like days, as you can imagine. But in the end, we made it thanks to a very good and joyful crew, despite the difficult circumstances. So from there, we continued the journey. I'm going to speed up a bit, so I fit in the 45 minutes, maybe. So we continued the journey northward again. Of course, we rounded Cape Horn, then continued to the Galapagos Island. We won't be able to stay too much time in the Galapagos Island, but just to tell you that we did some research on marine iguanas over there. So that's a magnificent place, really. Of course, you know that it's really it's related to Charles Darwin, of course, in a symbolic way. I was not too sure that I would love the Galapagos Islands as much as he did. First week I was a bit mild, you know, I was like, it's nice, but compared to Patagonia, it's not so impressive. And after 3 months, I was in love, and it was very hard for me to leave this place. The biodiversity is nuts, you know. Remember, I'm not a naturalist myself. I'm a filmmaker, so I'm entitled to say that wildlife is nuts, you know, sometimes. It's magnificent. It's endangered, of course, but it's also very well protected, which is quite nice. And here is the subject of our study over there. That's the marine iguana, and we spent a few weeks with scientists from Ecuador and Portugal as well, studying this modern-day dinosaur. That was really cool. We would dive with the marine iguanas, studying their behavior, filming their swimming techniques. And I can tell you that it's one of the shallowest dives of my life, because we stayed in the 3-meter zone, 3-4 meters, but one of the most beautiful at the same time, because you get to experience the wild. It's like diving a million years ago, you know. It's so beautiful. And again, some of the words of Charles Darwin resonated, of course, in this place. For instance, here he says, "I cannot give a more forcible proof of their numbers," talking about iguanas, "than by stating that when we were left at James Island, we could not for some time find a spot free from their burrows on which to pitch our tent. Today, I did a 2-hour walk on James Island, which is now Santiago Island, Isla Santiago, and I saw only one of them. So using Charles Darwin is very interesting to do this comparison across time. So this that was the scientist with us. We continue our journey crossing the Pacific Ocean. So we spent much time in French Polynesia here. That was amazing as well, studying coral reefs. You recognize your good neighbors, the kiwi, of course, and we had like much fun as well working with Save the Kiwi, not for profit, to understand how kiwis are saving kiwis, basically. And then we crossed the Tasman Sea, so that was a tough one. From Auckland to Sydney, the sail was definitely a bit hectic, intense, but by then, it's been 4 years now that we've been sailing, so I learned how to handle the boat. It's not the first time I experienced some heavy weather, so I'm more and more confident, not only in my boat, of course, but in myself as well. And I think that sailing is about being confident, but not too confident at the same time, to find the sweet spot in between. And I think that crossing the Tasman Sea, I was definitely in that spot. And of course, I end up in Sydney, not so far from here. And in Sydney, I had the pleasure to work on the subject of nature in the city and to be able to use some Conrad Martin's painting, again, to do a kind of time machine to understand how the world had changed in 200 years. So this is a painting of Sydney Cove. Maybe you recognize that. And we have a very talented artist on board. From the painting, she kind of drew how the landscape had changed in 2 centuries. So as you can see here, the Fort Macquarie is replaced by the Opera House. The shore is completely built with buildings. Some of the Sydney Cove was filled as well and built again. And here you go, you have 200 years of change in just one picture. Off we go, we continue. So this is our Sydney Hobart. So we left 2 days after the race. And I think it was a good strategy because 33 boats retired during the race. So we just waited for a good opening in the Bass Strait. And as you can see, we just like sailed past it. It was like a very funny sail that we did with Antoinette. And this is our arrival. You recognize this place, I'm sure. The Dolerites of Cape Rault. That was an amazing arrival. End of the day, the sun hitting the Dolerites, and us sailing a bit too close to. I just realized it by looking at the footage after. I was like, maybe I was a bit, a bit too confident on this one. But of course, it was a very moving moment that happened nearly exactly 190 years after Charles Darwin, that arrived in Hobart on the 5th of February. What's the date now? That's the 3rd. In 2 days, guys. So I know that you have like a bit of, I don't want to get political, of course, but some of you want to change the Australia Day. I propose the arrival of Charles Darwin in Hobart, Tasmania. I think it's quite cool. And it's kind of just amazing to think that he was there with the Beagle and he saw exactly this. How crazy is that? It's a time machine. So here in Hobart, we spent beautiful days and weeks studying the river ecosystems. That was a passion of Charles Darwin, of course. And so we met on the Hobart Rivulet. We really focused on the Hobart Rivulet, and we met fascinating people that maybe you know. John Gooderham, for instance, he's the waterbug specialist of Hobart. So he uses waterbugs that live in the rivulet to assess the health of the rivulet in specific places. And we met also Pete Walsh, the platypus whisperer, and went and spent some time with him in the rivulet. So I think this one was for the platypus, and that's not here. So this is the picture that I showed you just before. The footage was the rivulet upstream in Strickland Falls, maybe for those of you who knows. And this is a bit further downstream, and of course here you start to see, so it's the same rivulet, but of course it's impacted by people and the building of Hobart Town. So of course the rivulet changed over the years, but what John and Pete told me is that the rivulet was in a worse state at the time of Charles Darwin. Would you know why it could have been in a worse state than now at the time of Charles Darwin? Yeah, well, exactly. It's more specifically is the tannery. At the time of Charles Darwin, the rivulet was considered as just trash, that would just takes away everything, and the tannery was close to this place and would fill the rivulet with pollution. What I did as well in the rivulet, I don't want to preach for anyone here, but I was quite inspired to see people replanting trees along the rivulet to avoid erosions of the soil and provide a better ecosystem, healthier ecosystem to the people and to the animals as well, like the platypus. And as a proof of the will of the people who are actively protecting this planet, this was a dive that I did with a scientist, Rick Stuart Smith, in Bellerive. That's across Sandy Bay. And Rick, who is the diver over here, wanted to show me the worst place for native species in the Derwent estuary. Told me, I'm going to take you to the worst place with no native wildlife. So that's what we did. This is us sailing in the estuary, and after, I'd say 2 minutes of diving, he was like very happy to show me something, and I'm like, okay, so I'm gonna have a look, and here he's shedding light on a very tiny but beautiful seahorse. And when we got back up after an hour of dive, he said that it's the best news he had in a long time to dive in a place that was before completely annihilated of native species, and to see that now the substrate, the rocks, were colonized by kelps, algae, and native wildlife like this little guy here. So he told me that it was a testimony, in a way, of the good work done by many people in Hobart to try and protect the health of river ecosystems. So you have, for instance, here the Derwent Estuary Program, those people who are replanting as well, many people that actively do good things to protect the environment. So basically from all of this, and it's going to be my conclusion before the questions, we sailed to many places in this conference. I hope that you liked all of this, but the question still stands: what do we learn from all of this? Do we have only nice images, or do we have a plan for the future? I think what I'm trying to think about for this trip, I have two more years to go, so it's going to be 6 years of my life. And after 5 years of voyaging, Charles Darwin came up with the theory of evolution. What can I come up with after 6 years of voyage? My aim is to come up with some kind of plan to see if we can live in a peaceful way with nature, because as we saw in the rainforest, it's not always a good relationship that we have now. So I think that there are three main lines that we can draw from the time of Charles Darwin in the 1800s to now and the future. The first line I would draw is local impacts. Cutting trees, the tannery releasing pollution in the Derwent, in the Hobart Rivulet. Fisheries, too much fishing in the Pacific, in Polynesia, for instance. So this line was not at zero at Charles Darwin's time. Very important to understand that. It started before that. And in a way, it's normal that human population has an impact on the ecosystem. It's normal because we breathe, we eat, we have an impact. That's normal. But this impact started to grow bigger over the years. Kind of peaked, I would say, in the start of the 21st century. But you can see that many people do projects that kind of regenerate the bush, regenerate the lagoon in Polynesia, and this kind of project are actively impacting these local impacts so that they start to lower in the future. The other line is global impact. So this is climate change, ocean acidification, and of course, this did not exist at the time of Charles Darwin. So that's basically zero in the 1800s. But the causes are starting to appear. So that's like the Industrial Revolution. And it kind of grows bigger and bigger. And for now, the trajectories are like up for the future as well. The third line, and I think the most important, or like the one that makes me hopeful for the future, is human intervention. At the time of Charles Darwin, I'm saying it's zero from an Occidental perspective, of course, because I think that Aboriginal people, for instance, regarding Australia, but Maori people in New Zealand, Polynesian people in Polynesia, and so on and so forth, had an intervention and successfully built a balanced relationship with nature. But from an Occidental perspective, we started in the late 19th century when we started, for instance, to create national parks. And this line is growing bigger and bigger as well. So I think that now and for the future, we have to continue to be hopeful for the future, to act on a local level. That's so important. And acting on a local level equals to acting on a global level. Because if everyone's act everywhere on planet Earth, those initiatives will link up and make a global change. So that's like a last photo that I wanted to show to you. That's in Lewisham, and that's an association, people, women and men that are planting salt bush to avoid erosion on the coastline. And I wanted to finish this presentation on a hopeful note, of course, to show that despite living in a troubled time, we have good reasons to be hopeful for the future, and that might be a good message through the centuries from our favorite Englishman, Charles Darwin. Thank you so much for your attention. So maybe if you have questions on the boat, on the trip, any questions, I will gladly answer them.
So how much time did you spend on the east coast of Argentina where Charles Darwin found all the fossilized?
On the east coast, it's a good question.
He rode by horse.
He did. Yeah, exactly. He was a serious horse rider, Charles Darwin. I'm not. I'd like to be, but for now I'm not. I spent about a year, but you have to imagine that. So the boat was handled by the crew and by Robert Fitzroy. So Charles Darwin just needed to. He could like easily disembark. Ciao, guys. I'm gonna take like 20 days to horse ride in Patagonia. I cannot, because I'm like a boat. I don't know if you have one, but it's a very nice thing. It's liberty, but it's I don't know how you call this thing. That the convict had to. A millstone.
Millstone around your leg.
Yeah. So it's both things, which is quite interesting. And sadly, I cannot leave my boat that often, unless it's burst in a marina, for instance. But in Patagonia, on the east coast of South America, there's not a lot of marinas. Some of the times I wished I could have horse ride, but I did not. Yeah.
So how many crew did you have?
So we have four. We are four people on board, which is for this boat already crowded. So that's why you have to imagine that 70 people on a 30-meter long boat like Charles Darwin must have been like a hell. We are four people, and it's changing. Some of the times it's more sailors that are on board. Some of the times more scientists, divers as well. We do a lot of diving, and yeah, 4 people. It's good. I wouldn't do it by myself, Yes.
With 4 people, how did you organise the watches?
Good question, very technical question. The watches, so of course when we sail long distances, when we do long passages, we have always someone watching over the boat. We do 3 hours watches, and so we do 2 watches per day. So I would do, for instance, midnight to 3 o'clock in the morning, then noon to 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we take turns like that. Yeah.
With the Galapagos Islands, I gather Ecuador looks after them, do they?
Yeah.
And what's the sort of state of the island there in the diversity?
That's a very good question. It's indeed part of Ecuador, the country, and it's a very good example of how working together with the community leads to powerful conservation measures. The Galapagos Islands were thought to be a bit like I don't know how you call that. When you do a road trip, you stop in the gas station. Like it was a bit like the gas station of the Pacific at the time of Charles Darwin. People would stop there to take some water and to take some turtles as well. In some islands, some of the boats would capture 700 turtles at a time to have fresh food, and to roam the Pacific Ocean. So the impact of sailing over there in the 17th, 18th, 19th centuries were huge, and leading some species to extinction in some islands. So, for instance, the photo I was showing you earlier, so that was the giant tortoise of the Galapagos, actually disappeared from some islands, and so the intake, the fact that sailors would come up and take the turtles were one thing. The other thing, is invasive species, rats, rabbits, cats, and that would be the main driving factor for extinction worldwide, not only in the Galapagos. And so now what they do is that they actively restore places. So it's twofold: protect what remains and try to restore what's been lost. and it's very well done. It's very well done, but at the same time, it's islands, so in a way, it's easier to protect because it's like it's a very simple piece of land to protect because it has like a natural barrier. But it's very well done, and I think that in many places could get inspired by what they do. Yeah.
So you said on St James Island the population of the islands.
Yeah.
Like, what's caused that?
That's like invasive species. That would be definitely invasive species, rats especially. So what they do is that they have like these black boxes everywhere to catch the rats that are like one of the main threats. And they always do their project in 3 phases: assessment, invasive control, and then restoration. Yeah.
Did you have the opportunity to swim with the sea lions like this?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, sea lions are one of the best. They are the best. I just love them. I don't know if I have like a picture I could show you, but maybe like just a picture. I'm not sure I have like a video, but yeah, that's like they are such joyful creatures. It's a blast to spend time with them. So that's, I think, that's over there. I think, yeah, here. That's just great. I mean, you could spend hours swimming with them. They are just curious creatures, and they look around. They are everywhere in the Galapagos. And it's a specific species that they have in the Galapagos, and it's thriving, which is nice. Yes.
Did you find Charles Darwin's route up the mountain, and did you follow it?
In Mount Wellington?
Yeah.
Yes, I did. I cheated a bit because I took my car, not to the top, mind you. I went up to I think the dolerites, the organ pipes, and I walked for an hour and got on top early morning, rising sun, and again. It's so moving, it's so moving 200 years after to imagine that he would stand next to you, And I always wonder what he would think of all of this, of our time, what he would say to us. And that's, I guess, what I'm trying to understand by doing the same journey. To understand the way he would think. That's my curiosity. That's the reason why I'm doing this trip. I reckon. And so of course, I did. I think there's a trail on the estuary shore. I think Charles Darwin Trail. I need to have a look into that.
That's at Belrive on the other side.
Oh yeah. Wow. Yeah. I'm gonna do that definitely. Yes.
Do you have any plans to celebrate his birthday, which is February the 12th, I think?
Yes, February 12th of 1809.
Yeah.
It's Charles Darwin's Day, so no, it's a happy day for me, of course. But I'm not like I'm not like baking a cake for him or anything,
Where he had celebrated his birthday in Hobart, the house is still there.
Oh, you're right. Yeah.
His birthday in that house.
Yeah, that's true. You're right. He would have celebrated his birthday here.
And
Wow,
when he
that's
tried to
great.
go up Mount Wellington, his first guide got him lost.
Yeah.
Couldn't find the way to the
I
summit.
read about that. Yes,
And it intrigues me, Darwin must have been a fairly fit man.
he was.
Look at the top of Mount Wellington, think I'm going to climb there with
He
no
was.
trail, no markings, and I think he is probably the first European to climb to the summit, probably. And he described his
Maybe.
guide, quote, an ignorant oaf.
Yeah.
And he got the second guide to get him up there.
I think he was a fit man. It's not. I think. I'm sure he was a fit man because he would like spend as much time as he could outside of the boat. He was seasick. Can you imagine? He was seasick. Yeah. So each occasion he could like go out of his prison, so to speak, he would do that. So he would horse ride, he would climb on top of mountains. He was a very active man, you know. And that's what I think is fascinating about him. We do a lot of work with kids, school kids in France, trying to use the voyage to inspire them to be curious about nature, you know. And I think we need that. We need to take like this guy, the old grandfather of evolution, take him down to our level and understand that he was just a man. He was just a man, a young man, passionate, like any of us, and that's what we try to infuse in the kids that we work with: is be passionate about nature, be curious, because you might change the world someday, exactly like Charles Darwin did. Yes.
Am I allowed to ask one more question?
Of course.
In Kathmandu, I met a French filmmaker. He drank a bottle of red wine a day. Do you have wine on the boat?
Yes, I do. When I departed, I bought as many bottles of red wine that I could fit in my boat. I needed to have some room for first aid kit, for instance, of course, so I didn't put them everywhere, but I did bought a fairly amount of them. And I think by Cape Verde, none of them left, you know? Magic. And yeah, so it's the rarest of things now, you know. But French wine, but not good wine. Here you have fantastic wines, you know. So yeah, a bit different, of course, but you know, I continue to drink it. I don't mind, you know, drinking like other countries' wine. I'm fine with it.
So did you get up into the Andes where Charles Darwin went up about the horizon?
I did not, in fact. I did a bit in Valparaiso. We had like another problem. We destroyed the. Let me show that to you. We had so many problems with this boat. I mean, with any boat you have problems, but you know, sailing it full time. So let me check like this here. So this is the furling mechanism of the boat. So with this you can unfurl the front sail, which is called a genoa. This is a Yankee, so that's like a smaller sail that we use some of the times. This is the main sail over there. And when we were in Valparaiso, we intended, that's why I'm telling you the story, we intended to go and to do the same trip as Charles Darwin did. And what happened is that some lines that were holding the boat in place in a marina actually snapped. I was drinking a beer at the back, so this is called the cockpit here. I was just chilling after a day of work, and I hear like a big bang, and a line snapped, and because there was some swell entering the harbor, and this part of the boat, the stern? No, the stern is, yeah, the bow, sorry. So the bow was facing the pier. It was a concrete pier, and because of the backline that snapped, we were like taken by the swell, and this crushed against the concrete pier. So we lost this furling mechanism that was holding the mast, and we spent like the 3 weeks after that to kind of repair, and I couldn't go to the Andes, sadly, you know. And some of the times I figure that I'm doing a reboot of Charles Darwin's trip and Robert Fitzroy's trip at the same time, you know. So some of the times I need to choose between the two, and the boat always wins. If you're not taking care of the boat, everything stops. All right, it's good. I have one thing that I want to ask you guys, if you're fine with it. Today is actually the birthday of my best mate in France. His name is Thomas. Would you be okay if we do like a small video to wish him a happy birthday? Yeah? All right, so let me